They say the quietest homes hold the loudest secrets. Nathaniel Sterling thought he was the master of his universe. He had the 7-figure architecture firm, the sprawling estate in the hills, and the young, exciting secret kept tucked away in a downtown loft. But when he put his key in the lock at 2:14 a.m., smelling of vanilla perfume and cheap betrayal, he didn't know he was walking into a crime scene of the heart. No bodies, no blood. Just a pair of diamond earrings glittering on a marble table, and a note that would dismantle his entire life in 11 words. This isn't just a breakup story. This is the autopsy of a marriage where the wife didn't just leave. She settled the score. The rain in Seattle doesn't wash things clean. It just makes the dirt slicker. That was the thought running through Nathaniel Sterling's mind as he guided his silver Porsche Panamera up the winding driveway of 42 Skyline Drive. The house, a modern glass and steel monolith he had designed himself, usually glowed like a beacon. Tonight, it was a dark moor. Nathaniel checked his reflection in the rearview mirror. At 45, he was aging with the grace of a man who could afford the best dermatologists and tailors. He rubbed a smudge of crimson lipstick off his jawline, sienna's shade, midnight fire, and straightened his collar. He had told his wife, Catherine, that the chaotic zoning meeting for the high-rise project had run late. It was a lie he had used 3 times this month. It was a lie that had become as comfortable as an old pair of loafers. He killed the engine. The silence of the garage was oppressive. Usually the motion sensor lights would flood the space with warmth. Tonight they flickered once and died, leaving him in shadows. "Damn sensors," he muttered, grabbing his briefcase. He unlocked the door to the mudroom, expecting the low hum of the HVAC or the distant sound of the television. Catherine often fell asleep, watching old noir films in the den. But as he stepped onto the imported Italian tile, the air felt different. It wasn't just quiet, it was vacant. The air was cold, stale, as if the house hadn't inhaled in hours. "Cat," he called out. His voice bounced off the walls, harsh and too loud. "Sorry about the time. The councilmen were impossible." No answer. Nathaniel walked into the kitchen. The ambient under-cabinet lighting was off. He reached for the switch, flooding the room with harsh LED light. That's when he saw it. The kitchen island was a slab of white Carrara marble, usually cluttered with Catherine's architectural digests, mail, or a vase of fresh hydrangeas. Tonight it was completely bare, except for one object placed with geometric precision in the dead center. A black velvet box. Nathaniel's stomach turned over. He knew that box. He had purchased it 6 months ago from Garrard & Co. in London during a business trip, a trip where he had actually taken Sienna, not Catherine. He had bought the earrings, 5-carat teardrop diamonds, as a guilt offering for Catherine upon his return. They cost more than most people's cars. Catherine had worn them once at the charity gala, and then put them away. He walked toward the island slowly, the click of his heels sounding like gunshots. He reached out and flipped the lid open. The diamonds caught the overhead light, flashing with a brilliance that felt mocking. They were beautiful. They were cold. Underneath the box sat a single sheet of heavy, cream-colored cardstock. It was their personalized stationery. Nathaniel picked it up. His hands, usually steady enough to draft blueprints for skyscrapers, were trembling. The handwriting was Catherine's, elegant, sharp, devoid of loops or flourishes. "I stopped listening to your lies a year ago, Nathaniel. Tonight I stopped paying for them." That was it. No, dear Nathaniel. No, "I'm leaving you." Just a statement of fact. Nathaniel dropped the note. A sudden, irrational panic seized him. He sprinted toward the stairs, taking them 2 at a time. "Catherine!" he screamed. He burst into the master bedroom. He slammed on the lights. The room was immense, a testament to his success, but it looked wrong. It took him a second to process the visual data. The bed was made with military precision, the duvet taut. But the nightstands, they were empty. No reading glasses, no water carafe, no stack of books. He ripped open the doors to the walk-in closet. His side was untouched. His rows of Armani suits, his shelves of shoes, his color-coordinated ties were all there. He looked to the left, to Catherine's side. It was gutted. Not just empty, erased. The shelves were white and dusty. The hangers were gone. The drawers where she kept her lingerie, her jewelry, her scarves, all pulled out and left gaping open like hungry mouths. There wasn't a stray sock or a forgotten hairpin left behind. Nathaniel stumbled back, his breath coming in short, shallow gasps. This wasn't a fight. This wasn't a packing a bag and going to her mother's situation. This was an evacuation. He ran to the ensuite bathroom. The counter was bare. Her expensive creams, her toothbrush, the magnifying mirror, gone. The only thing left was the faint scent of her lavender soap, fading fast. He pulled his phone from his pocket, his fingers fumbling over the screen. He dialed her number. "The number you have dialed is no longer in service. Please check the number and try again." He froze. He dialed again. "The number you have dialed." "No," Nathaniel whispered. He hung up and called Arthur Pendleton, his business partner and best friend. Arthur would know. Catherine and Arthur's wife, Linda, were inseparable. The phone rang 4 times. Then Arthur picked up. His voice was thick with sleep, but heavy with something else. "Rick, where is she, Artie?" Nathaniel barked, pacing the empty bedroom. "She's gone. She took everything. Is she at your place? Put her on." There was a long pause on the other end. "Rick," Arthur said, his voice dropping an octave, "you need to stop." "Stop what? My wife has vanished. I come home and—" "Rick, listen to me," Arthur interrupted, his tone sharp. "She's not here, and she's not coming back. I tried to warn you to be careful with that girl, that Sienna. I told you Catherine wasn't stupid." "This isn't about Sienna," Nathaniel lied, though the nausea in his gut said otherwise. "It's entirely about Sienna," Arthur said. "And Rick, you shouldn't be calling me. You should be checking your wall safe." "What? Check the safe, Rick." The line went dead. Nathaniel stared at the phone, the screen going black in his hand. "Check the safe." He threw the phone onto the bed and ran back downstairs, heading for his study. It was a dark, oak-paneled room, his sanctuary. Behind a large oil painting of the Seattle skyline, a piece Catherine had commissioned for his 40th birthday, sat a high-security wall safe. He gripped the frame of the painting and swung it outward. The digital keypad of the safe glowed faint blue. He punched in the code, 091299, their wedding date. Error. Nathaniel blinked. He typed it again, slower, 091299. Error. System locked for 5 minutes. No, no, no! Nathaniel slammed his fist against the steel door. She had changed the code. But how? It required a biometric scan to change the master code. His eyes darted to the side of the safe. There was a key override, but the key was kept in a bank deposit box downtown. A deposit box both he and Catherine had access to. He ran to his desk and booted up his iMac. The startup chime sounded cheerful, mocking the dread rising in his throat. He needed to see his accounts. If she had left, she would need money. But the bulk of their liquid assets were in joint accounts, or in the corporate holdings which she, as the CFO of Sterling Architecture, had signatory power over. He had always thought that was a smart move. Catherine was a math whiz, a former forensic accountant before she helped him build the firm. He was the artist. She was the structure. He never bothered to look at the ledgers because the money was always there. He logged into the primary bank portal. Username, Arsterling password. He hit enter. Alert. Suspicious activity detected. Please contact branch. He opened a new tab for their investment portfolio. He managed to log in there. He stared at the screen. He blinked, thinking the page hadn't loaded correctly. Total portfolio value, $142. I now 50. Nathaniel let out a strangled sound, something between a laugh and a sob. Yesterday that number had been close to $4 million. He clicked on Transaction History. Transfer, wire out to Holloway Trust. Cayman, $200,000. Pending transfer, wire out to Holloway Trust. Zurich, $800,000. Completed liquidation of assets, stocks, bonds, completed. The timestamps were from this morning, while he was presenting blueprints to the city council, while he was texting Sienna under the table about dinner plans, while he was buying Sienna that Hermes scarf she wanted. Catherine had been draining him dry. He grabbed his wallet and ripped it open. He pulled out his black Amex. He needed to know if he was completely destitute. He dialed the number on the back of the card. Customer service. This is Sarah. How can I help you, Mr. Sterling? My card, Nathaniel stammered, sweat dripping down his temple. Is it working? One moment, sir. Ah, I see a flag here. Mr. Sterling, the primary account holder, reported the card lost or stolen at 4:10 p.m. today. A new card has been issued to the secondary address on file. Secondary address? What secondary address? P.O. Box 404, Zurich, Switzerland. Nathaniel dropped the phone. Switzerland. She wasn't just leaving him. She was fleeing the jurisdiction. He sank into his leather executive chair. The room felt like it was spinning. How long had she known? You don't move $4 million in a day without months of prep work. You don't get a Swiss P.O. box overnight. He thought back to the last few months. Catherine had been quieter. She had stopped asking him where he was going. She had stopped nagging him about family vacations. She had been working late, too. Audit prep, she had said. Audit prep, Nathaniel whispered to the empty room. She wasn't auditing the company. She was auditing him. He looked around the study. His awards were on the shelves, his degree, his legacy. Then his eyes landed on the bookshelf to his right. There was a gap in the books. A file folder was standing upright, facing him. It was red, the color she used for urgent tax documents. He reached out and pulled it down. It wasn't tax documents. It was a dossier. He opened it. The first page was a photo. It was grainy, taken from a distance with a telephoto lens. It showed Nathaniel and Sienna sitting at a cafe table in Pike Place Market. Nathaniel's hand was resting on Sienna's thigh. He turned the page. Another photo. Nathaniel and Sienna entering the boutique hotel on 4th Avenue. He turned the page. A copy of a lease agreement for the loft he rented for Sienna, signed by Nathaniel Sterling. He flipped through the pages faster. Credit card receipts for jewelry, dinners, hotel rooms, transcripts of text messages. Sienna. He's so clueless, baby. He thinks his wife buys the late meetings excuse every time. Nathaniel. She's focused on the numbers, not the passion. You're the only one who sees me. Reading his own words, printed on crisp white paper, made him feel sick. But it was the last page of the file that stopped his heart. It wasn't a photo or a receipt. It was a photocopy of a medical report. Patient, Catherine Sterling, date. 3 months ago. Diagnosis, early-stage ovarian cancer. Treatable with immediate hysterectomy and chemotherapy. Nathaniel stared at the paper. Cancer? She had cancer? He scanned the notes. Patient declined immediate scheduling to settle affairs. Oh my God, Nathaniel gasped. He hadn't known. She hadn't told him. He looked at the date on the medical report. It was the same week he had taken Sienna to Cabo for a golf trip. Catherine had been home, receiving a cancer diagnosis alone, while he was drinking margaritas and sleeping with a 24-year-old paralegal. Beneath the medical report was a sticky note, written in that same steady, sharp hand. I needed a husband, Nathaniel. I found a roommate. I decided to prioritize my survival. Since you clearly invested in a different future, I took the liberty of investing in mine. P.S. The house is in my name. The eviction notice is on the foyer table. You have 24 hours. Nathaniel stood up, the chair toppling over behind him. He ran to the foyer. He hadn't looked at the console table when he came in. There it was. A thick envelope with the logo of a prestigious law firm, not Arthur's, Whitmore and Associates, Sharks. He ripped it open. Notice to vacate, restraining order, petition for divorce on grounds of adultery and cruelty, and one final document, a transfer of deed. The house, this glass and steel masterpiece, his pride and joy, had been transferred 3 weeks ago to a holding company, Phoenix Rising LLC. He was trespassing in his own home. Nathaniel fell to his knees on the cold Italian tile. The silence of the house wasn't just quiet anymore. It was heavy. It was the weight of a judge's gavel. He was alone. He was broke. And the woman he had underestimated for 2 decades held every single card in the deck. But Nathaniel Sterling was an architect. He knew how to build things, and he knew how to fix structural damage, or so he told himself as he stared at the eviction notice. He grabbed his phone again. He wasn't calling Arthur this time. He was calling Sienna. She was all he had left. She would understand. They were in love, right? It wasn't just about the money. He dialed her number. Hello? Sienna's voice was groggy. Sienna, it's me. It's bad. Catherine. She knows. She took everything. I need to come over. There was a pause, a long, uncomfortable silence. What do you mean, she took everything? Sienna's voice had lost its sleepiness. It was sharp, alert. The accounts, the money. She froze it all. She even took the house. I need a place to stay tonight. Wait, Sienna said, her tone changing from sharp to cold. So you're broke? It's temporary, baby. I can fix this. I just need— Nathaniel, Sienna interrupted. I can't have you here. My landlord. He's really strict about overnight guests. I pay your rent, Sienna. I am the landlord. Actually, Sienna said, and he could hear the rustle of sheets as she sat up. You're not. The lease is in my name, paid by a direct debit that Catherine set up for you, remember? If the accounts are frozen, the rent check is going to bounce. Sienna, please. Look, Nathaniel, you're a nice guy, but drama isn't really my brand. Good luck. Click. Nathaniel stared at the phone. The silence returned. Total. Absolute. He looked at the diamond earrings on the kitchen island. They were the only assets he had left in the world. He walked over, grabbed the velvet box, and shoved it into his pocket. He turned to the front door, ready to leave, ready to fight, ready to burn it all down if he had to. But as he reached for the handle, he saw something taped to the glass. It was a Polaroid photo. It showed Catherine. She was standing on the tarmac of a private airfield. She was wearing a trench coat and sunglasses, looking like a movie star. But she wasn't alone. Standing next to her, holding her hand, was a man. Nathaniel squinted. He knew that man. It wasn't Arthur. It wasn't a stranger. It was David Sterling, his own brother. The rain had turned from a drizzle into a deluge, hammering against the windshield of the Porsche like handfuls of gravel. Nathaniel drove without seeing. The wipers slashed back and forth, a metronome counting down the seconds of his collapsing life. David. The name tasted like ash in his mouth. His younger brother, the one Nathaniel had bailed out of debt 3 times, the one who had stood as his best man, smiling that lopsided, boyish smile, while Nathaniel vowed eternal fidelity to Catherine. David, who was a mediocre landscape artist, a drifter, a man who lived in the shadow of Nathaniel's skyscrapers. Nathaniel steered the car toward the industrial district of Sodo. David lived in a converted warehouse loft on First Avenue South. Nathaniel knew the address by heart because he owned the building. He had bought it 5 years ago as a tax write-off and let David live in the penthouse unit rent-free. It was just another way Nathaniel exerted control, generosity that came with strings attached. He pulled up to the curb, the tires splashing into a deep puddle. The building was dark, the red brick slick with rain. Nathaniel didn't have his keys. Catherine had taken his house keys, but the master key to his commercial properties was hidden in a magnetic box inside the Porsche's wheel well. A contingency plan for property management emergencies. He retrieved the cold, wet metal box, his fingers numb. He let himself into the building. The freight elevator was broken. It was always broken. So he took the stairs. 4 flights. His breathing was ragged, not from exertion, but from the crushing weight of the betrayal. He reached the heavy steel door of Unit 4B. He didn't knock. He jammed the key in and twisted. The door swung open. Nathaniel expected to find a bachelor pad. He expected dirty laundry, empty beer bottles, the smell of turpentine and oil paint. David was messy. David was chaotic. But the loft was immaculate. Nathaniel stepped inside, the door clicking shut behind him. The space was lit only by the street lamps outside, filtering through the massive, rain-streaked windows. The orange glow of the sodium lights cast long, distorted shadows across the floor. The furniture was sparse, a single leather armchair, a drafting table, a bed made with military precision. Nathaniel walked deeper into the room. "David," he whispered, though he knew the loft was empty. The silence here was different from the silence in his mansion. It wasn't the silence of abandonment. It was the silence of focus. He approached the far wall, which was usually covered in David's abstract landscape paintings. The paintings were gone. In their place was a corkboard that spanned 12 feet. Nathaniel flicked on his phone's flashlight and swept the beam across the wall. His breath hitched. It was a timeline. Strings of red yarn connected photos, documents, and sticky notes. It looked like the wall of a homicide detective solving a serial murder case. But the subject of the investigation wasn't a killer. It was Nathaniel. He stepped closer, the light trembling in his hand. August 12th, 2023. A photo of Nathaniel entering a jewelry store with Sienna. Note: purchase, diamond tennis bracelet. Card ending in 4491. Catherine's birthday forgotten. September 5th, 2023. A printout of an email from Nathaniel to his contractor, authorizing the use of substandard steel in the low-income housing project to cut costs. Note: violation of code. Leverage. October 20th, 2023. A photo of Catherine sitting on a park bench, weeping. David was sitting next to her, his hand on her shoulder. Note: she knows. Initiate phase 2. Nathaniel felt the blood drain from his face. This wasn't just an affair. This was surveillance. David hadn't just stolen his wife. He had been cataloguing Nathaniel's sins for years. He moved to the drafting table. Usually, David's sketches were blurry watercolors of trees and lakes. Nathaniel shined the light on the blueprint taped to the desk. It was a design for the Spire of Light, the award-winning skyscraper that had put Nathaniel on the cover of Architectural Digest. It was the design that made Nathaniel a millionaire. But the date on the blueprint was from 2005, 2 years before Nathaniel invented it. And the signature in the bottom corner wasn't Nathaniel Sterling. It was David Sterling. Nathaniel gripped the edge of the table. The memory hit him like a physical blow. 2005. David had been in grad school, brilliant but shy. He had shown Nathaniel a sketchbook. Nathaniel had laughed, patted him on the head, and told him the engineering was impossible. Then Nathaniel had taken the sketchbook for safekeeping. He had stolen it. He had built his empire on his little brother's genius, banking on the fact that David was too weak, too passive to fight back. He looked down at the drafting table again. Beside the blueprint was a handwritten letter. The ink was fresh. "Brother, you always said I lacked vision. You said I couldn't see the big picture. But I saw everything, Nathaniel. I saw you cheat on the woman who sacrificed her career to manage your books. I saw you steal my designs and call them your legacy. I saw you ignore Mum when she was sick because you were too busy at a gala. Catherine didn't come to me for revenge. She came to me for help. She was dying, Nathaniel. She found the lump 3 months ago. You were in Cabo with Sienna. She called you. I checked her phone logs. She called you 4 times. You sent her to voicemail. That was the moment you ceased to be her husband. That was the moment you became a target. We didn't just take the money. The money is irrelevant. We took your name, the designs you're working on for the city centre. I released the originals to the press this morning. By noon tomorrow, everyone will know the great Nathaniel Sterling is a fraud. Enjoy the silence." Dave Nathaniel dropped the letter. He backed away, his legs hitting the leather armchair. He collapsed into it. The rain hammered against the glass, harder now. He wasn't the victim. In his own mind, he had been the provider, the king, the benevolent ruler who allowed his wife and brother to exist in his orbit. But in this room, under the harsh light of his phone, the truth was unavoidable. He was the villain, and the scariest part wasn't the bankruptcy. It wasn't the loss of the house. It was the realization that Catherine, the woman he thought was a boring, number-crunching housewife, had looked him in the eye every morning for 3 months, poured his coffee, ironed his shirts, all while methodically plotting his total annihilation with the one person he had dismissed as a failure. Nathaniel put his head in his hands. For the first time in 20 years he cried, not for Catherine, not for David, but for the terrifying realization that he was exactly what they said he was, small. 30,000 feet above the Atlantic Ocean, the sky is a color that doesn't exist on Earth. It is a deep, bruised indigo, fading into the infinite black of space. Catherine Sterling stared out the porthole of the Gulf Stream G650. The cabin was quiet, save for the low, rhythmic hum of the engines, a sound that felt like safety. She pressed her forehead against the cool plexiglass. Her reflection ghosted over the clouds below. She looked tired. The dark circles under her eyes were not from the stress of the heist, but from the war being fought inside her own cells. Stage 3, ovarian. The doctor, Dr. Aris, had been kind but blunt. "It has spread, Catherine. We need to be aggressive." She shifted in the cream leather seat, wincing as a sharp pain radiated through her lower abdomen. She reached for the amber pill bottle on the side table, dry swallowing a painkiller. "Cat?" The voice was soft, laced with concern. She turned. David was sitting across the aisle, a blanket draped over his legs. He wasn't looking at the tablet in his lap. He was watching her. He had always watched her. Not with the hungry, possessive gaze Nathaniel had used in the early years, but with a steady, anchoring presence. "I'm okay," she said, her voice raspy. "Just the turbulence." David unbuckled his seatbelt and moved to the seat facing her. He reached out and took her hand. His fingers were long and slender, pianist's hands, artist's hands. Nathaniel's hands were broad, fleshy, always grasping. "He's at the loft by now," David said quietly. "The sensors triggered on the door 10 minutes ago." Catherine looked back out the window. "Did he find the wall?" "He found it." "Good." She didn't feel triumph. She had expected to feel a rush of adrenaline, a surge of victory when the plan finally executed, but all she felt was exhaustion. "Do you think we went too far?" David asked. It was the question of a man who still had too much heart, despite everything. Catherine turned her gaze back to him. Her eyes, usually a soft hazel, were hard as flint. "Too far?" She laughed, a brittle sound. "David, do you remember the Christmas party in 2018? The one where Nathaniel made a toast to the support staff and pointed at me? I was the CFO. I built the tax structures that saved the firm millions, and he called me support staff while his hand was on the waitress's lower back." She took a sip of water, the memory burning brighter than the pain in her gut. "He erased you, David. He erased me. He treated people like disposable tissues. He used us until we were tattered and then looked for a fresh box." She squeezed his hand. "We didn't go too far. We just balanced the ledger. It's simple accounting." David nodded slowly. He knew. He carried the scars of Nathaniel's ego just as deeply as she did. "What about the treatment?" David asked, shifting the subject to the only thing that truly mattered now. "Zurich has the best oncology clinic in Europe," Catherine said. "Dr. Weber is expecting us. The admission is anonymous, paid for by the Holloway Trust. And if—" David hesitated. "If it doesn't work?" Catherine looked at the diamond ring on her finger. Not the wedding band Nathaniel had given her, but a simple silver band she had bought for herself at a market in Florence years ago. "Then I die free," she said simply. "I die knowing that for the last chapter of my life, I wasn't waiting for a man to come home. I was the one steering the plane." She closed her eyes, leaning her head back against the headrest. She thought about Nathaniel. She pictured him in the rain, soaked in his Italian suit, screaming at a locked safe. She tried to summon pity. She tried to find that well of love that had existed 20 years ago when they were young and hungry. It was dry. Nathaniel had killed her love not with a single blow, but with 1,000 paper cuts, the missed anniversaries, the lipstick stains, the way he looked through her, not at her, the way he had made her feel like a piece of furniture in his grand design, functional, necessary, but ultimately replaceable. When the doctor had told her cancer, it was like a bell ringing in a fog. It woke her up. She realized she had been sleepwalking through a nightmare. She remembered the night she went to David. It was raining then, too. She had driven to his loft, shaking, terrified of the diagnosis. Nathaniel was in Cabo. David hadn't offered platitudes. He hadn't told her, everything will be fine. He had made her tea. He had sat with her in the dark. And when she said, "I want to hurt him, David. I want to take everything before the cancer takes me," David hadn't tried to talk her out of it. He had simply opened a drawer, pulled out a stack of stolen blueprints and said, "I have a plan." The plane banked gently to the left. "Ladies and gentlemen," the pilot's voice crackled over the intercom, "we are beginning our descent into Zurich. Local time is 8 a.m. The weather is clear and cold." Catherine opened her eyes. The sun was rising over the Alps, painting the snow-capped peaks in shades of gold and rose. It was blindingly beautiful. She reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. She had one last message to send, not to Nathaniel. He didn't deserve any more words. She opened the email app. It was addressed to the Board of Directors of Sterling Architecture. Subject: Resignation and disclosure of intellectual property theft. Attachment, the original Spire of Light. Sketches by David Sterling, 2005. She hovered her thumb over the send button. Ready? David asked. Catherine smiled. It was the first real smile she had worn in years. Ready. She pressed send. As the plane descended toward the white, clean slate of Switzerland, Catherine Sterling didn't know if she would live another year. She didn't know if the chemo would work. She didn't know if she would ever see Seattle again. But as the landing gear deployed with a mechanical thud, she knew one thing for certain. She was finally the architect of her own life. The morning sun in Seattle did not bring warmth, it brought exposure. Nathaniel had slept in his Porsche, reclined in the driver's seat, parked in a shadowed alleyway 3 blocks from his office tower. His neck was stiff, his mouth tasted of stale coffee and regret, and his Italian suit, usually his armor, was rumpled and damp. He checked his reflection in the rearview mirror. His eyes were bloodshot, rimmed with red. He looked like a man who had lost a fight, which was exactly what he was. But Nathaniel Sterling was not a man who accepted defeat. He was a narcissist cornered, and that made him dangerous. He convinced himself, in the delirium of sleeplessness, that he could spin this. He could talk his way out. He always had. Catherine is unstable. He rehearsed the narrative in his head. The cancer affecting her mind. David is a jealous, failed artist manipulating a sick woman. It was a good story. It was a lie. But it was a plausible one. He started the car. The engine purred, the only reliable thing left in his life. He drove toward the Sterling Architecture Tower, a 40-story needle of glass that pierced the skyline. He had designed it. It was his monument. As he turned the corner onto Fifth Avenue, he saw the crowd. News vans were double-parked along the curb. Satellite dishes rotated like hungry eyes. A sea of reporters jostled against the velvet ropes that security had erected. Nathaniel felt a surge of adrenaline. The press. He could use them. He would play the devastated husband, searching for his sick, runaway wife. He pulled the Porsche up to the valet stand. He stepped out, buttoning his jacket, smoothing his hair. He expected the flashing lights. He expected the questions. "Mr. Sterling! Mr. Sterling!" The shout came from a woman in the front row. It was a reporter from the Seattle Times, a woman he had charmed at galas for years. "Mr. Sterling, is it true that the Spire of Light design was stolen?" Nathaniel froze. The smile he had been plastering onto his face cracked. "Is it true you authorized the use of Grade B recycled steel in the Harborview low-income project?" shouted another voice. "Do you have a comment on the fraud investigation launched by the district attorney this morning?" Nathaniel stumbled back. This wasn't about Catherine leaving. This was about the email. She sent the email. He pushed past the microphones, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. "No comment! Get out of my way!" He reached the revolving glass doors of his building. He pushed inside, seeking the sanctuary of the lobby. The lobby was silent. The receptionist, a young woman named Sarah, who usually greeted him with a bright smile and a latte, was not at her desk. Standing there instead were 2 men. They wore cheap suits and serious expressions. One of them held a tablet. "Nathaniel Sterling," the taller one asked. "Who are you? Where is my security detail?" Nathaniel demanded, though his voice lacked its usual boom. "I'm Detective Miller, Economic Crimes Division. This is Detective Sobek." Miller flashed a badge. "We have a warrant for the seizure of all electronic devices and physical files related to Sterling architecture and your personal accounts." "On what grounds?" Nathaniel screeched. "Grand larceny, fraud, and—" Miller glanced at his tablet. "Criminal negligence regarding the Harborview structural integrity. We received a very detailed dossier this morning from a whistleblower. David. The elevator doors behind the detectives opened. Arthur Pendleton walked out. Nathaniel's business partner. The man who was godfather to the children Nathaniel never had. Arthur looked 10 years older than he had on the phone the previous night. He held a cardboard box filled with personal items. Arthur! Nathaniel lunged forward. Tell them! Tell them this is a misunderstanding. It's Catherine. She's sick. She's trying to ruin me. Arthur didn't stop. He walked right up to Nathaniel, his eyes cold and dead. The board convened an emergency meeting at 6 a.m., Nathaniel, Arthur said, his voice flat. We reviewed the sketches Catherine sent, the metadata on the files, the handwriting analysis. It's all there. You didn't design the spire. You didn't design the library. You haven't drawn a line in 20 years. I am the face of this company, Nathaniel roared, grabbing Arthur's lapel. Arthur shoved him off with surprising strength. You were the face, Arthur corrected, dusting off his jacket. Now you're the liability. We voted unanimously. You're out, Nathaniel. Fired. And since you violated the morality clause in your contract by embezzling funds for, what was it? Sienna's loft? We are seizing your stock options to cover the legal fees. Arthur walked past him, toward the revolving doors. Arthur! Nathaniel screamed. I made you! Arthur paused and looked back. No. David made us. We just took the credit. Arthur exited the building. Nathaniel stood alone in the center of the lobby he had designed. The detectives moved in, one taking each arm. Mr. Sterling, we need you to come with us. As they marched him out, not through the VIP exit, but through the front doors into the waiting storm of flashbulbs, Nathaniel saw one face in the crowd that stopped him cold. It was Sienna. She wasn't hiding. She was standing next to a reporter from TMZ, holding a microphone. She was wearing the Hermes scarf he had bought her yesterday. She looked sad. Beautifully. Tragically sad. I had no idea, he heard her say, as he was shoved into the back of a police cruiser. He told me he was separated. He told me his wife was abusive. I'm just a victim in his web of lies. The heavy door slammed shut. The glass separated him from the world. He watched Sienna dab a dry eye with a tissue, the cameras eating it up. He was trapped in a cage of his own making. And 5,000 miles away, the two people he had underestimated were watching the sun rise. Zurich was a city of clocks and chocolate, precision and indulgence. But the Clinicum Sea was a place of white walls and hushed whispers. It sat on the edge of the lake, looking more like a luxury hotel than a hospital, but the smell was the same. That faint, sharp scent of antiseptic and fear. Catherine sat in the infusion chair. A plastic tube snaked from a bag of clear liquid into the port they had surgically implanted in her chest 2 days ago. Paclitaxel. Even the name sounded like a hex. She watched the drip. 1 drop. 2 drops. Poison to kill the poison. David sat in the armchair beside her. He had a sketchbook open on his knees, but he wasn't drawing. He was reading aloud from a book of poetry. Rilke. Let everything happen to you. Beauty and terror. Just keep going. No feeling is final. He closed the book and looked at her. The fluorescent lights of the hospital room washed him out, highlighting the grey in his beard that Nathaniel had never noticed. How is the nausea? He asked softly. Manageable, Catherine lied. It felt like her insides were being scrubbed with steel wool. The view helps. She gestured to the window. The lake was a sheet of hammered silver, the Alps rising behind it, like jagged teeth. Arthur emailed me, David said, his voice hesitant. Catherine didn't turn her head. And? Nathaniel was denied bail. The judge considered him a flight risk because of the Swiss wire transfers. They think he has offshore accounts. They don't know the accounts are empty. Good, Catherine whispered. Let him sit in it. David sighed, running a hand through his hair. They found the structural flaws in the Harbour View project. They're evacuating the building. 300 families. Nathaniel cut costs on the support beams to pay for a diamond necklace for Sienna. If that building had collapsed... But it didn't, Catherine cut in, because you stopped it. She reached out and took his hand. His skin was warm, dry, real. You saved those people, David, by exposing him. David looked down at their joined hands. I didn't do it for them, Cat. I did it for you. The silence stretched between them, heavy and loaded. It was a conversation they had been dancing around for 20 years. Why didn't you tell me? Catherine asked, her voice barely a murmur. Back then, before I married him. Why didn't you tell me he was stealing your work? David looked up, his eyes wet. Because you looked at him like he was the sun. You were 24. You were brilliant and ambitious, and he was charming and loud. If I had told you he was a fraud, you would have hated me. You would have thought I was the jealous little brother trying to sabotage him. I thought if I let him have the career, he would treat you right. I thought his success would make him happy enough to be a good husband. He laughed bitterly. I was the architect of this disaster, Cat. I built the pedestal he stood on. Catherine squeezed his hand. A tear tracked down her cheek. We were both deceived, David. He sold us both a dream. He just used different currency. The door opened and Dr. Webber walked in. She was a tall, severe woman with kind eyes. She checked the monitors. The infusion is almost done, Mrs. Sterling. How are we feeling? Tired, Catherine said. That is to be expected. The first cycle is the shock. The body rebels. Dr. Webber made a note on her chart. But your blood markers are responding. It is early, but there is hope. Hope. It was a dangerous word. Catherine had lived without it for so long she had forgotten the taste. Rest now, the doctor said, patting her shoulder. Tomorrow is a hard day. She left the room. David stood up to adjust Catherine's blanket. As he leaned over, the scent of him, turpentine and rain, filled her nose. It was a smell of home she hadn't realized she missed. David, she said. Yeah? When this is over, whatever happens, don't go back to the shadows. Promise me. David looked at her. He brushed a stray hair from her forehead. His touch was so gentle it made her heart ache. I'm not going anywhere, Cat. I'm right here. I've always been right here. She closed her eyes, the rhythmic beeping of the monitor lulling her toward sleep. In her mind, she saw Nathaniel in a concrete cell, stripped of his suits, his name, his pride. She felt a twinge of something, not pity, but finality. He was a ghost. And here, in this sterile room in a foreign country, with poison in her veins, and a man who had loved her in silence for 2 decades holding her hand, Catherine Sterling felt something she hadn't felt in years. She felt alive. But outside the clinic, in the pristine streets of Zurich, a black sedan was parked. The man inside was watching the window of room 304. He picked up a phone. She's here, the man said in perfect English, and the brother is with her. Good. The voice on the other end cracked. It was a woman's voice. Sharp, vindictive. Nathaniel might be in jail, but he still has friends who owe him favors, and he wants his diamonds back. Catherine thought the war was over. She thought Nathaniel was neutralized, but a narcissist never accepts he has lost control. Even from a cell, Nathaniel Sterling had one last card to play, The door to room 304 didn't burst open. It clicked shut with a terrifying softness. Catherine opened her eyes. Standing at the foot of her bed was the man from the sedan. He was wearing a raincoat that dripped onto the sterile linoleum. He wasn't a doctor. He was a relic of Nathaniel's shady dealings in zoning permits. A fixer named Silas. David stood up slowly, placing himself between the man and Catherine. "Get out!" Silas ignored him. He looked at Catherine, his eyes devoid of sympathy. "Nathaniel made a call from the holding cell. He says you have something of his. The Garrod earrings. 5 carats. "He's in prison, Silas," David said, his voice low and dangerous. "He can't pay you." "He said I keep one. I give him the other for legal fees." Silas shrugged. "I'm taking both. Hand them over, Mrs. Sterling, and I walk away. No noise. No trouble." David stepped forward, fists clenched, ready to fight a man twice his size. "David, stop!" Catherine's voice cut through the tension. It was weak, but commanding. She reached into the bedside drawer and pulled out the black velvet box. She held it out. "Take them." "Cat, no!" David protested. "Those are your insurance." "Take them," she repeated, staring Silas in the eye. "Tell Nathaniel I said he earned them." Silas snatched the box. He flipped it open, checking the glimmering stones. He smirked. Smart lady. He turned and slipped out the door as quietly as he had entered. David slumped back into the chair, defeated. "Why?" "We could have called security. Those were worth a fortune." Catherine began to laugh. It started as a wheeze and bloomed into a genuine, full-bellied laugh that made the monitors beep frantically. "David," she gasped, wiping tears from her eyes. "Do you really think I would carry $100,000 in diamonds in my purse? I'm an accountant." David looked at her, confused. "I sold the real diamonds 3 months ago," she whispered, a mischievous glint returning to her eyes. "That's how I paid for the jet. That's how I paid for your new studio space in Zurich. The ones in that box, high-grade cubic zirconia, cost me $200 on Amazon." David stared at her. Then a smile broke across his face, the first real smile in years. Epilogue. 6 months later. The visitation room at the state penitentiary was cold. Nathaniel Sterling sat behind the plexiglass, wearing an orange jumpsuit that clashed with his sallow skin. He looked broken. His lawyer sat across from him. The appeal was denied, Nathaniel, and the appraisal came back on the earrings Silas turned in. Nathaniel leaned forward, desperate hope in his eyes. "And? That's 50 grand, easy. Enough to get a new attorney." The lawyer shook his head. "They're glass, Nathaniel. Worthless. Catherine played you." Nathaniel didn't scream. He didn't rage. He just sat there, mouth open, as the final structural beam of his ego collapsed. He was a man who had spent his life building glass houses, and he had finally been cut by the shards. Thousands of miles away, on a balcony overlooking Lake Zurich, Catherine adjusted her scarf. Her hair was short, growing back in soft curls. The chemo had been hell, but the fire in her cells had burned out. She was in remission. David sat at an easel nearby, painting the sunrise. He wasn't signing it Nathaniel Sterling. He was signing it David. "What do you think?" he asked. Catherine looked at the painting. It wasn't perfect. It was messy, vibrant, and real. "I think," she said, taking a sip of coffee, "it looks like freedom. And that is the end of the Sterling dynasty. Nathaniel chased the sparkle and lost the gold, ending up with nothing but a pair of fake earrings and a prison sentence. Catherine and David proved that the most expensive things in life, loyalty, talent, and freedom, can't be bought, and they certainly can't be stolen. It's a brutal reminder that when you build a life on lies, the truth will eventually foreclose on you. This story was a roller coaster, and I want to know what you think. Was Catherine's revenge too harsh, or did Nathaniel get exactly what he deserved? If you were David, would you have helped her? If you enjoyed this story of justice and betrayal, please smash that like button. It really helps the video reach more people. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. I release new dramas every week. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next video.